Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming to the Ministry of Trade and Industry for this session. I'm very pleased today. I thought it was opportune that we can pull some matters relating to coronavirus and trade, and in particular trade, consumer protection, business integrity, food security, and we wanted to capture those kinds of topics. With me, I'm very happy to have Franca Costello, the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, and on the line, Mr. Gabriel Faria, who is the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber. Mr. Dexter Morgan from the Ministry's Consumer Affairs Division is with us, as well as Mr. Bevan Narayan Singh, who is the CEO at Executive Director of the Fair Trading Commission. So, and I'll go right into the discussion. So countries and businesses have had to navigate several global health challenges over the last 2 decades, such as the H1N1 influenza and so on in 2009. But the latest, of course, has been the COVID-19. And the major difference, however, is that this challenge not only originated in the world's second largest economy and leading trading nation, China, but as of today, the COVID-19 has emerged in over 136 countries. So apart from the human adversity, China's economy, and consequently the global economy, is affected as that country is a central manufacturing hub of many global business operations. Additionally, 2 of Trinidad and Tobago's other trading partners have also been affected, and that's the United States of America and of course, the European Union. The slowdown of manufacturing in China due to the virus has disrupted world trade and perhaps would result in an estimated US $50 billion decrease in exports across global value chains, according to economic estimates. In February 2020, China's Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, the PMI, which is a critical production index, fell by approximately 22 points since 2004. And such a drop in output implies a 10 to 20% reduction in exports on an annual basis. That's the scale of it. As I said, China is the world's second largest economy and leading trading nation with trade volumes of US $14.14 trillion. They are the largest manufacturing economy in the world, and therefore economic fallout from the coronavirus will impact global economies and global growth. And with therefore many companies and countries depending on the health of China's economy, the outbreak has caused severe disruptions across the world in terms of falling oil demand. And there's been much discussion on that. Disruption to commerce generally, production delays, volatility in stock markets. In particular also in travel and tourism. Travel and tourism industries globally have been hit by the economic disruption from the outbreak. And of course, global airline revenues are expected to fall. Shipping also has been one of the biggest casualties of the virus, and about 80% of world goods trade by volume is carried by sea, and China is home to 7 of the world's 10 busiest container ports. So that's the impact of it. And here at home on the domestic economy, over the last week, we have seen the dramatic declines in the international energy markets, and the Minister of Finance has already briefed the media on the expected fiscal impact of this challenge of pricing. And of course, with regard to tourism and the cruise ship industry, that too would have already been addressed in the media. With regard to manufacturing, based on discussions with the Trinidad and Tobago Manufacturers Association, and also we've continued to have discussions with the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber as well, the majority of manufacturers to date have not expressed a significant impact to date. They haven't verbally expressed so, but it's likely to come later on. However, the reduction of China's production of manufactured goods, especially parts and materials, over the last 2 months will have a carryover effect on shipping, on delivery, and lead time of supplies imported from China. And in order to mitigate the risk of depleted inventory, manufacturers from Trinidad and Tobago, some of them have already started considering alternative supply chains. On the other hand, Trinidad and Tobago, and this is as regards the manufacturing industry as well, our top regional exported products include items from the food and beverage industry and spirits, and are predominantly purchased by countries as Barbados, Jamaica, Guyana, Grenada, St. Lucia, and so on. So, however, imports from these countries are largely dependent on the buoyancy of their tourism industry, and therefore, as their tourism is significantly impacted in these particular countries that I've spoken of, obviously there'll be an inevitable reduction in demand for related products from us in Trinidad and Tobago, from the manufacturing sector. So I want to go back to a bit of facts on our relationship with China in terms of the numbers and the level of imports, so we can put things into perspective. In 2019, Trinidad and Tobago recorded probably about $3.83 billion in imports from China. And the products imported are generally non-energy related and products, mainly household items, appliances, food and textile clothing products, air conditioning parts, garlic, household appliances, apparel, and that kind of thing. And of course, we have actually detailed the top 50, and we've looked at those and analyzed those. And they are from the retail and distribution companies, followed by the manufacturing companies. And it's notable, though, and I want to speak a little bit about the recovery that is taking place in China, however small it is. So that several shipping lines, such as CMA, CGM, have already reopened offices in China, and which were reported closed due to the coronavirus outbreak. And others are working towards a return to normal operations very soon. In addition, major coastal ports are now operating at normal productivity levels. Those are all very good and promising signs. There are also some signs of recovery of manufacturing in China. China's Economic Recovery Index suggests that around 68% of business activities, including manufacturing and consumption, have resumed operations. Eastern and southern Chinese cities, which are major manufacturing hubs for electronics and machinery and textiles, are seeing faster recovery pace at this time. Businesses involved in providing daily necessities have also resumed work and production, as well as those that are key to global industrial chains, after receiving the necessary government approval and so on. So all of these are good signals that that as far as we are affected by the supply chain, particular to China, that there's some light on the horizon, and that we can see the resumption of supplies. We have been talking as well with a number of importers in Trinidad, and large importers, and who have expressed the stock of goods in Trinidad being still substantial, and also that many of them do have supplies en route to Trinidad and Tobago, not only from China but from different sources. I want to just perhaps touch a little bit on the trading relationship with the United States, being our largest trading partner, and therefore an economy that we also monitoring closely, as it would impact our trade. And I'll tell you that in 2019, Trinidad and Tobago's imports from the U.S. Was approximately $13 billion, with the majority of imports comprising retail and distribution. Specifically, food-related items. I'm talking about wheat and meslin, corn, maize, fertilized eggs, soybean oil, and packaged cakes, and so on. So again, we are concerned about the level of supply, and in that regard, we have had discussions again with our suppliers, our local suppliers, and we are comforted again by the stock stock in hand and also goods on the water to Trinidad and Tobago. So right now, I don't believe that there's any significant threat to these imports from the U.S. With regard to our relationship with the EU, again, another close trading partner. We looked at the imports. The amount is $5.6 billion TT per annum, and with the majority of imports being medicaments, appliances, milk and potatoes, and some other food items. Examining the top 50 importers of European Union products, they are mainly the manufacturing companies, followed by the retail and distribution companies as well. I want to skip a little bit. I know we'll entertain questions at the end, but to consumer protection, to say that in times of perceived crisis or concern, there's generally a spike in the demand for basic food and non-food items, and particularly with respect to the COVID-19, for cleaning and sanitizing items. And this presents an opportunity sometimes for unscrupulous merchants. I hope we have few of those in Trinidad. Few of those within the business community to capitalize on the vulnerabilities of the citizens of their country and engage in price gouging activities. Price gouging, as you know, is a term referring to a steep increase in the price of goods, services, or commodities by a seller to a level much higher than is considered reasonable or fair. It is an unethical pricing strategy which compromises proper business policies and practices and ultimately takes advantage of the consumer. In the light of this, the Consumer Affairs Division is calling on all businesses to be fair in their pricing and to refrain from price gouging and any other exploitative practices. In a global health crisis, there is no place for this type of corrupt and unprincipled behavior. The Consumer Affairs Division will continue to monitor the prices at our supermarkets, groceries, all outlets, in order to safeguard the consumer interests in this respect. Additionally, consumers are encouraged to exercise their power of choice and engage in comparative shopping in all situations. Withhold purchase of any item that you believe to be unreasonably priced and patronize elsewhere where you believe you have received value for money. The division will continue to publish our price listings as scheduled to aid consumers in their decision making. And on that note, can I just say that with regard to business integrity, the Fair Trading Commission, the Trinidad and Tobago Fair Trading Commission, wishes to advise the business community, specifically those involved in the manufacturing and the distribution or sale of public health products, that bad actors, and this is how they determined, seeking to engage in anti-competitive practices such as price fixing, bid rigging, and market allocation will not be tolerated. More specifically, the business community is reminded that under Part 3 of the Fair Trading Act, an agreement that seeks to fix prices, limits or controls markets, shares markets or sources of supply, applies dissimilar conditions to equivalent transactions, or makes contracts subject to extraneous conditions is an anti-competitive agreement and is prohibited under the Act. And that any enterprise that is found to have been party to an anti-competitive agreement has contravened the Fair Trading Act and may face a fine of up to 10% of their annual turnover. In this regard, the business community should anticipate increased monitoring and enforcement by the Trinidad and Tobago Fair Trading Commission, who stands ready to ensure that consumers are not taken advantage of at this crucial time. I want to just say a little bit more about, bear with me, on food security. The Ministry of Trade and Industry and also the Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, we have been looking at and surveying the major manufacturers and importers of basic food items in items like rice and flour, sugar, milk and oil to determine the supply and the availability of these items. We have been in conversation Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries is in contact with many of the producers, the chicken producers, and so on, and to ensure that there is, to be satisfied that there is an adequate stock of these items locally. There is absolutely no shortage, and therefore there's absolutely no need for panic buying. And the government will continue, both ministries, to monitor the stock and the overall situation, understand very clearly the goods that are on the water, particularly very basic items, and to ensure that consumers will have the availability of all food items, particularly items in the food basket. There is absolutely no need to be concerned at this time about the availability of food items. Our local manufacturers and importers, we've been talking to them, National Flour Mills, Venco, Hadco, National Canners, they are all committed to working with the government to respond to any particular variances in the market in terms of supply and availability of basic food items on the market at very short notice. In light of this, I wish to assure you that there's absolutely, again, no need to engage in impulse buying at this time. Again, that only creates instability in the economy, in the distribution network, and it creates a disequilibrium in the market. And we want to guard against that. The Consumer Affairs Division of the Ministry of Trade and Industry, will also be vigilant for all of these unscrupulous practices and businesses that use the situation as an opportunity to profiteer by engaging in price gouging. I come back to that, and fear mongering. Right, and again, I emphasize that Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries, and I will continue to monitor stock levels and expected outputs, shipments expected, risk attached to shipments depending on the sources, and so on, looking at their weekly balances, ensuring that there is food security in the nation. Again, looking at chicken and eggs, meats, flour, all the basics, bread, pasta, baby milk, sugar, oil, and so on, beans and peas, some of the canned stuff and so on. And again, we wish to give the assurance to the public that there is no crisis and that with regard to food supply in the country. Thank you very much. And I have Mr. Gabriel Faria online. I want to ask him to give a few comments, then ask Ms. Costello to follow, and then you may ask questions of all of us subsequently. Thank you. Mr. Faria.
Yeah, thank you very much, Minister. Are you hearing me clearly?
Very clearly.
Yes. Okay. So I would like to first commend you and the Minister of Health, because the engagement you have had with the private sector has been very proactive. And in fact, what has happened is that to let the public know, many manufacturers and importers have actually identified alternative sources. In the Ministry of Health, the big thing was gloves, for example. And while China is one of the leading sources of gloves, when we met, we identified that Malaysia, Thailand, and Brazil were also options. And in fact, at the meeting, another supplier came up, Mexico, and companies have actually started reaching out to alternative suppliers. The same applies for food. Countries like Turkey are very large suppliers of beans and of pulses. So what has happened, just so that the public know, is many companies, both manufacturers and importers, have identified alternative sources. And while yesterday I was asked to speak on this, while people are buying and they're in panic, they cannot consume at the level they have bought. So yes, last night the minister and myself were speaking to one of the importers, and he told us, he said, yes, I'm going to run out for a couple of days, but I have more containers coming in, and I've identified and topped up because I need to find alternate sources. So I think that both manufacturers and importers are taking a proactive approach, and I'd like to commend the Minister of Trade and the Minister of Health specifically, who have been reaching out and engaging us. I want to make one more point. The other point is the TNT Chamber does not support or will not support any organization which uses this situation to take advantage of consumers. We will look on it with severe distaste, and if necessary, we will take very firm action on that individual. There's no need to panic. And in fact, when you look at what happens in the supermarkets, the concept of social distancing has gone away because there's so many people crowding the supermarkets. So I think it's important we let people know that we are not going to facilitate any action. And I think I want to commend the Minister for the Fair Trading Act. It's now fully implemented, and we look forward to ensuring that the business community supports the people of Trinidad and Tobago at this trying time. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much for taking time out of your leisure. I understand you're on a little holiday, and and thank you for your support always and collaboration, Gabriel, and your members in particular. I want to ask Franca Costello to speak on behalf of the TTME. Thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you to the media for having the TTME here today. And following on the CEO of Chamber's remarks, I would like to also commend you on the effort that has been made on the Ministry of Trade's behalf in reaching out to the business community and the wider public as well to safeguard and create a sense of calm. And in these times, it is that we need to be reasonable and keep our heads down. I would like to read a statement that I have prepared. The recent transmission of the coronavirus in Trinidad and Tobago is expected to impact our daily lives and disrupt business as usual. The challenge for us is to maintain business and services while protecting those who work for us, our customers and our clients. Foremost is the need to reduce the spread of the virus by proper health practice. Already members have taken action to implement rigid hygiene on site, suspend non-essential travel, facilitate home-based work and put measures in place for voluntary temporary isolation of employees returning from overseas travel. These actions are commendable and evidence of responsible management as we collaborate on containing the spread of COVID-19. As business leaders, our national community will look to us for direction and guidance on the appropriate response to this health threat. It is essential that we continue to act sensibly and responsibly in our actions and in our communication to avert undue panic. I remain confident in the business community's agility to adapt and deliver new ways of doing business for the sake of maintaining both economic and social stability. It is important that we pivot in how we offer our services and products to continue providing citizens and customers the goods and services they need, especially those that are deemed essential. What we are presented with in the face of this crisis is an opportunity to be innovative in how we work and how to leverage technology to commercial advantage as we manage through the pandemic. In anticipation of potential cancellations of large-scale meetings, the TTMA has already taken action to connect and facilitate interface with our staff and membership through technology. In this regard, you will be hearing from us shortly on how we can participate remotely. We want to thank the manufacturing community for acting responsibly, and we want to thank all of the employees of the manufacturing sector, 50,000 of the nation's community, for being there to support each other in this time of need. And I want to resonate on the Minister of Trade's comment that we must act responsibly in not taking advantage of situations. And I have full confidence in the corporate social responsibility of our companies. We have seen us come together in times of trying times, and I know that we will do the same here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Franco Costello, for your remarks and for the commitment by the manufacturers in this country to ensure supply and, of course, hygiene and the safety of our employees as well, the 50,000 of those with you. I want to raise one point because he would be upset I didn't say it, but this morning I had a chat with Gregory Abboud from DOMA as well. What he was concerned about was textiles and whether or not, he said people started asking, are we going to get school shirts to go to school? And he wanted to give the assurance that he's been in contact with his suppliers in China as well. They have already started locally their manufacturing and also their manufacturing in China. There would be supplies. There would absolutely be no disruption, and therefore school supplies. We're in March, but we're given the commitment that by August you will have all of your supplies, your white clean shirts and so on. So DOMA and of course preparing as well in our discussions to assist wherever he can, and that is from the Downtown Merchant Association to ensure that there's supply and reliability of goods to the nation. Thank you. I'm inviting questions, if you will.
Is
yes?
price gouging illegal?
I want to put it in the context of the Fair Trading Commission. It is absolutely wrong and corrupt, but I want to put it in the context of the Fair Trading Commission and its practices and rules and regulations.
Well, thank you, Minister. Well, the issue of price gouging is really, if the Fair Trading Commission has to get involved in that, it really will be happening if you're charging excessive prices based on you having a dominant position, so exploiting a dominant position. So that's how a price gouging situation may arise, but of course it depends on an entity having a dominant position. But Mr. Wilson, I guess the issue that you would have raised is also a consumer one as well too. And so how we get involved, it's in a business context with an abuse of a dominant position. So I don't know if Mr. Morgan wants to add anything with respect to the consumer element of price gouging.
Before he does.
Yes.
There apparently is a situation with increased cost of hand sanitizers, which apparently is an essential product in a period of COVID-19. Is a 30% increase in the price of a hand sanitizer illegal in the context of the manufacturer of that hand sanitizer facing increased costs for the input of that good?
Let me say, increased costs is a result of shipping because there are those that may have been air freighted in, the product that may have been air freighted to meet demand. I can understand the increased price that is attributable to that transportation cost. Other than that, the fact of increases on account of just the product being simply in demand is unreasonable, and this is what we find to be unscrupulous. And whilst it's not illegal, it is completely frowned upon. And of course, we encourage the customer to shop elsewhere. And again, we repeat, don't panic. It's available. You perhaps cannot get 6 bottles now or 12 bottles. What perhaps retailers and distributors should be doing is say, we're going to give 2 per customer or 3 per customer to ensure that it goes a long way. But I know for a fact that manufacturers of hand sanitizers, I can tell you, have raw material coming in. Local manufacturers do in fact have raw materials coming in to ensure that by next week, Wednesday, there's another release of locally manufactured hand sanitizers in the country. So you're going to have a continual supply. You don't have to have 12 bottles now. You will have other supplies coming on stream, but I want to ask Dexter to support me here.
Okay. The Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago approved the National Consumer Policy 2018-2023. That policy is expected to guide new and harmonized consumer legislation. So when we look at other jurisdictions, we are seeing that with respect to price gouging, they are saying that in certain jurisdictions that in situation of crisis, they are expected that suppliers should not increase their prices by over 10%. So we are currently engaging a consultant in the preparation of new consumer legislation, and we are definitely going to consider including that piece of legislation in our new consumer protection legislation.
So price gouging is not now illegal. It may be unethical, but the question is, what is the Ministry of Trade Consumer Division going to do about instances of price gouging in this country?
Inform. I would think it'll be information and communication to the public, information of pricing, and in fact, Dexter, we don't have to wait until it's our due date to inform of prices across the board. We can look at perhaps just a few items that are in great demand now, and report the pricing and the availability as well. Yeah, but yes,
as early as next week, our officers will be on the field, and we will be looking at prices with respect to these particular items.
Okay, hi, good day, Rashad Khan, Guardian Media. So it's not illegal, it's frowned upon. Could you go into some detail about the policing of this then? How are you all going to, you're going to look at there's reports on social media and pictures showing people with hand sanitizers that used to cost $30, upwards of $50 and stuff now. So how are you all going to keep checks on these people? Because you said that you would expect, Minister, that with the air freighting in of these products and stuff, prices would increase. But, I mean, what if it's just really and truly people trying to capitalize on the situation?
Well, as was stated earlier, we cannot prevent persons from selling these products at higher prices. What we can do is monitor commercial activities, inform consumers, and encourage them to make wise purchasing decisions. That's the most we can do at this current stage.
And I can tell you that members of the Consumer Affairs Division will be in the field next week, early next week, looking at the prices and the availability across the country and reporting on it on social media.
If I might jump in, Minister.
Yes.
I remember, I think it was probably 3 or 4 months ago, you called the chamber to express concern on an increased price for something. I can't remember the exact product now. So the reason I'm raising that is that I know that when your unit goes out, you would either call the importer, if you know them, or the manufacturer, or if you don't, you would call the chamber or GTMA, and you would say, we noticed this price went up unusually, and we'd like to identify why. So what I think I'm trying to let the media recognize is that you yourself are active in engaging the people to try to sway them to verify that they are being as fair as they can be.
I'll tell you, yes, that I do hold distributors and manufacturers sometimes if I am concerned about the increase in prices of particular products. Let me tell you, the Ministry of Trade and Industry and the government gives up a lot annually when we go to quoted and we're allowed, there are concessions that are given to manufacturers and so on. And therefore, we do not want to see those as opportunities for increased pricing. They are to keep prices down, and they are to promote manufacturing. It is not for a significant benefit for the manufacturer. So I personally, as Minister of Trade and Industry, frown upon price increases, and unnecessarily so. I understand business very well, and there are circumstances where price increases are warranted. But you know, we're in a very complex situation, and what do we want? We want stability, and we want to return to our economy, and everybody has to play a part. Has to be a part in that, and that's why consumers ask. You don't have to go and shop and buy all at the expensive price, you know, and you could look elsewhere. You could buy 2 today, 2 next week, 2 the next week, and that kind of thing. And because that kind of stability, all of us are players in it. Retailers, distributors, manufacturers, and consumers as well. I can tell you, I personally have gone out there and done any loads of shopping at all.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I note that the IMF has said that $50 billion worth of global exports have been taken off in February. You're saying that there's no shortage, but of course the situation is changing dynamically. It's changing. let's just say that there's a further slowdown of global exports, global trade. How much supply of food do we have?
And this is what we're ascertaining. And this is the Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries and myself, Mr. Rambrat, and I have been discussing. We've allocated among ourselves, between the two of us, exactly which products we're going to oversee. We have been on the phone. He's been talking to the, I'm telling you simply as it is, he's been talking to the poultry suppliers, examining the stock of eggs and poultry in the marketplace, meats. I have been on the phone myself. I was speaking last night to Gabriel Faria in a three-way conversation with a large importer about stock of supplies as well. Are there things on the way? So we want a little bit more of a definite structure. And so I have the staff doing up a matrix now. We are going to be discussing directly with suppliers, and so that we have an understanding, as I say, of what is existing from the suppliers, distributors, and from the manufacturers. What kind of output we can expect and on imports as well, output from manufacturers, imports as well. Are we going to study the risk? Are there any impediments which will deter any shipments on the way? And of course, every week looking at supply as well. There is no crisis in terms of supplies, absolutely no crisis. But we want to be assured, and this is why we have a very determined and involved approach at the level of the ministers as well, to ensure. To be satisfied. The government needs to be satisfied.
It's a little bit confusing that you're saying there's no shortage, but we don't know how much we have.
Yeah, but no, as I said to you, we've started the exercise, so I can't tell you 50 pounds of potato and 10 pounds of chana. But we have started the exercise, and I've said to you what is being done in terms of building out a matrix, having a conversation. It takes responses as well to come from the suppliers and from the manufacturers. But this is what we are building out and ensuring that we monitor very closely and look at a weekly position as well.
When you say that there's also no shortage in the supply of goods, we're also talking about fuel and pharmaceuticals. Is that included when you say goods?
We are not monitoring pharmaceuticals, but I am doubly sure, and I can give you every assurance that that is being done by the Ministry of Health. And the question of fuel is a matter that is being looked at by the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. And I'm assuring you that I know that the minister has taken the responsibility to look at that too.
So you said that there are shipments on the way, etc. But is it that consumers could expect to pay more given the global shortage?
Well, there are two things. Ordinarily, distributors would have had shipments on the water coming in. Mr. Faria also said to us that there are cases where there have been concerns about supply, particularly from China, because that's where that would have been the source of the outbreak, and that's where the supply disruption would have taken place initially. So that already I am very much aware that there are suppliers distributors who would have looked at alternative markets, and so that there are goods. Now there is, of course, we understand that there must be a price factor in there, because obviously the reason many of the goods have been coming from, most of the goods have been coming from China, many goods have been coming from there, non-food, I would say, have been coming from China because of price. And so that there might be some price increase on account of that, but there's an element of reasonableness that we expect from everyone. And as again, all players ensuring that there's stability in supply and of course in the marketplace and in the economy. That's all we want, all players being a part of that. I think Franca Costello wants to say something.
I want to stress on that, all players. This is an ecosystem where we all work together. So as long as everybody keeps the wheels working in their own areas, everything is going to be business as usual. Business as usual in that we will have to adapt to new ways of maybe doing business, but the output and the manufacturing process, raw materials coming into the port clearing it out, businesses functioning just maybe in a different atmosphere. Some people might work from home, different spacing of work environments, but business as usual will continue. The supply chain that would have been an effect from China having a slower export was 3 and 4 weeks ago. Manufacturers have sought out alternative suppliers already. They've also looked at different supply chain routes. So a lot of these mechanics have been worked out beforehand. You will see some impact on trade of some imported goods, maybe some brands that you were used to may not be the same brands anymore, but the vital essentials are going to be there. The majority is still going to be there. The manufacturers have signaled not only do they have an abundance of raw material on hand right now, and some have actually took precautions weeks ago to double up on inventory, but they already have shipments en route as well. So as long as we all, and when I say we all, I mean business sector, the private business sector, and government agencies, all keep the wheels working, we will be fine as a community. This is an entire ecosystem that has to work together.
Yes.
I understand all that, but of course we can't control what goes on in the rest of the world. Let's talk about local production. Your conversations with the Minister of Agriculture, have you all at all talked about boosting local production?
No, I mean, we would have started our detailed work on this yesterday, and but I'm sure that's going to be part of it. What my commitment is as well is to keep in touch with the media on this. And the government, I think, has been communicating very well over the entire, I don't want to call it a crisis, it's a circumstance that all of the world is bearing. And we will keep in touch with you, because I give you all these assurances here today that we are looking closely and so on. And you don't know what else may happen. It's an evolving matter. And what I want to do is give you the commitment, as with the government. Certainly the Minister of Agriculture, Lands and Fisheries and I will continue to look at the supply of goods, and particular food, more than anything else, and its availability, and we will report to the media and the national community.
Minister, the government, the state, has 51% stake. The state has a 51% stake in National Flour Mills, which produces flour, cooking oil, and other things. So surely you as a Minister of Trade would have a very good idea of what the inventory of flour and cooking oil at NFM is. Could you please let us know the answer to that?
I can tell you that they have generally over 2 months of supply currently, but there are shipments on the way expected, and we don't envisage a disruption. But I could be a little bit more specific with you and do a media release on the very basic items, but I want to confirm that our preliminary discussions have said that they have at least 2 months supplies. They do have shipments on the way as well for all of their requirements. I really expect no disruption.
I just have a final question about our shipments continue to come. What about the checks at the port? Crew members of ships, what checks are being done at our ports?
Normal checks which are done by Port Health and
thermal scanners.
Normal checks are going to be in operation. I can't understand that. I can't understand why.
Well, if you have crew coming from other countries with maybe
crew members, of course, no. I want to say that that is definitely a matter for the Ministry of Health, and whatever protocols are in place will apply to anybody entering this country. The protocols are as existing as dictated on behalf of the government by the Minister of Health, and they exist for all and sundry.
Hi, I'm Carl Brijal from the Newsday. I just want to clarify now, since we're finding all sorts of alternative routes and supplies, have these been checked and cross-checked, etc., with the ministry and various authorities for health and safety standards? Like the products coming in, do they meet all health and safety requirements? Or will that take extra time for approval to come in for, safety of consumption and all that?
Okay. No, I want to just say that we are examining the risks attached to any of supplies coming from alternative destinations, and the safety safety and health of our citizenry will not be compromised in any which way. all of the normal scrutinies or that are required, I can tell you will be adhered to, and yeah, there will be no compromises at all.
Well, I think what my colleagues were trying to get is, if in a worst case scenario Trinidad and Tobago had to be locked down, what is the level of our food security?
No, I mean, I just don't see. I think you're really looking at the worst case scenario. I mean, I don't see it, but I certainly can't. I can't be a voice of predicting where things could go. You don't know. This thing has evolved, and I want to say that we are satisfied, and what we have committed is that we will be in touch with you and as we get further details on actual stocks. And as I said, we're doing up our matrix of supplies and to understand clearly what we have. And there is at this time absolutely no shortage of any food in the country. Let's not be pessimistic. Part of the thing is, no, let's not be pessimistic. Part of the entire action that we should all take is one of care, yes, but calm as well, Paula. Yeah, so there's absolutely no need to be overly concerned about shortages also.
And perhaps Ms. Costello could answer this one. Clearly, we seem to have, in terms of dire emergency situations, toilet paper is in high demand. Trinidad and Tobago does manufacture toilet paper. Do you have any idea in terms of the rollout in that manufacturing, in getting that to the shelves? I mean, I assume in some places there'll probably be a short-term shortage of toilet paper, given the number of people who bought yesterday. So, you know, what is in terms of, you know, products that we manufacture for the local market? You know, do you anticipate? Has there been, since this situation, and you did mention it, you know, we started seeing the signs of a disruption in supply for like a month ago. You know, are manufacturers still producing at the capacity that they had been producing, you know, before the pandemic started?
I've reached out to a few of our manufacturers, and none of the manufacturers that I spoke to indicated a disruption in their production or in the demand of their supply as well. So as of this week, their demand in both export and domestic was consistent. What happened yesterday in terms of the rapid buying that was going on is I would have to check back in, but based on doing the factory tours that I have done at the local manufacturers for toilet paper, I am very confident that they are going to meet local demand. And I know that a big portion of their production goes to export, and if they needed to reduce that and keep it for local demand, then I'm sure that they would do that to satisfy the local market. But based on the capacity that they function at and the technology that they have running their facilities, I am very confident that they have enough raw materials and the technology to meet demand.
In addition to which, apart from the main manufacturer of tissue paper, there are several other manufacturers now in the marketplace. So
absolutely,
there's quite a bit of production of tissue paper in the country, and much of it going to export. But I mean, if we have to have any discussion about switching and ensuring that there's local supply, Ms. Costello has said yes. But there now we're probably about 5 or 6 people producing tissue paper now in Trinidad.
It's one of our top exported products, actually. So I have no worries there.
Minister, one of the things that authorities do in circumstances like this is name and shame. So the question is your ministry prepared to name and shame price gougers or profiteers in the current circumstance?
Well, in a sense, that's what the that's what the Consumer Affairs Division will do. But I can tell you, I will pick up the phone and have a conversation first. I like the business of collaboration more than anything else, and I will talk to any supermarket owner, any manufacturer about it. And if I get a feasible an understandable explanation, fine. But I will pick up the phone and ask, and I know the vigilance that is conducted by the by the Consumer Affairs Division will really work again to ensure that there's little of this.
And the ministry has the TTMA support to that extent as well. We would not tolerate that type of behavior either.
I noticed a short while ago the Prime Minister announced he actually urged managers and business owners to implement realistic sick leave policies and to be flexible with workplace arrangements. Not sure if any conversations were had before. Have you all thought about this? You or Mr. Faria discussed it at all with your membership? Any positions?
Our membership is, right now, again, we're talking to different members on how they are managing it, and some of our members are coming up with unique arrangements when it comes to sick leave policy and so on. But as of right now, we are guided by government policy when it comes to sick leave. And as this may develop and things change, we may adapt it. But right now, the policy for sick leave stands as it is, and businesses are advised to adhere to it.
I can perhaps add as well that Minister of Labour is in charge of a group of us ministers. I am also in a grouping, and we are in fact looking at work practices, both in the public sector and private sector, and formulating some kind of policy to guide the TTMA, the Chamber, and in fact all employers, ministries, etc., in the country, so that I am well aware that the minister is at work in developing the technical policies, and we meet again tomorrow, Saturday afternoon, on it, and so that it's something that is pretty much being looked at very closely.
Given that given that we are talking about social distancing, but then with consideration be made about, media conferences, even meetings?
Yes, but I could tell you that there are some foreign meetings that we are no longer attending. I mean, if it's absolutely important, surely we'll be doing it via video conferencing. And but generally, you would want to exercise some kind of slowdown and caution and discretion in your meetings, and avoiding, of course, any unnecessary crowded spaces. I mean, I can tell you that in the ministry, even where I'm having a town meeting on Monday about coronavirus as it relates to them personally, I'm holding it in 2 sessions to ensure that it's not an overly crowded space. So at least I have half the staff first and then another half, and so on. When we discuss and hear from them their thoughts and feelings and what we're doing and what the country is doing and so on for them.
So just to go back to that, the policy, will that be expedited given the circumstance? I mean, we are clearly rapidly changing and evolving in terms of the way we work. Will that policy be expedited to carefully articulate policies from work from home and sick leave?
I am so confident in the work of my colleague, Minister of Labour, Jennifer Baptiste-Primus, and I'm sure that when we put our heads together tomorrow, we will be able to speak to the public pretty soon on some immediate practices that can be put in place. And of course, some will be at the discretion. We can't impose, and I'm sure that some are going to be at the discretion of the employer. I want to leave this topic for a further discussion, this particular topic about labour practices and work practices, for the Minister of Labour when she speaks with the population on our behalf, on the government's behalf.
Do you know when?
I'm sure it's going to be soon.
Well,
We meet on Saturday. We are meeting tomorrow.
Okay. Well, then perhaps I can ask Ms. Costello and maybe Mr. Faria, if he's still on the line. Do you all have any sort of policy? You did sort of mention it, especially to delineate between work from home and sick leave, because sick leave is a clear legal distinction.
Okay. So, there's certain types of businesses that can facilitate work from home. So, for example, today I'm working from home.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you're running a manufacturing line, or if you're the front line of customer service, you can't. And what many businesses are doing are looking at staff and identifying if there is an issue, let's try to work from home. I think some people may have seen today Unicoma made a decision in their organization because of a potential risk. So many organizations are very proactive on this. We have to mitigate any potential risk. So if we have a staff member, if any organization has a staff member that has a potential risk, in fact, I can tell you right now, quite coincidentally, one of our staff members at the chamber sent an email to us and said, my son goes to this school and someone else, I'm going to work from home today, I'm going to get checked, and I'll work from home today. And she is working from home, she's involved in phone calls. So more and more companies are doing that because we don't want to take the risk of damaging our entire workforce. I don't know if that helps. I mean, and software facilitates that. You know, we're doing video conferences, voice conferences, sharing information on Microsoft Teams, right? So there are a number of options.
But do you foresee this as being like a turning point in the way that we work? I mean, you know, Trinidad and Tobago is basically an 8-to-4 society.
Is that still to me?
Yeah, well, it's either you or Ms. Costello.
So, well, I can answer. I think the world is going to force us to rethink how we evaluate productivity in our workforce. And what you are seeing is many organizations. I saw something internationally there where Twitter has asked all their workers to work from home. There's nothing wrong with working from home once you can evaluate the productivity you get out. As I said, in a factory, that is not easy. You can't do that. So you're going to need to bring workforce, and maybe Franca can speak to that. In service industries, some of it can be done, and we are going to be challenged to innovate in the way we evaluate productivity and outcomes as we go forward. I don't know if Franca wants to comment on our manufacturing perspective.
Yeah, I think that we're already in that space, even coronavirus or not. We're already moving into a digital transformation space where, you know, factories are being outfitted with a lot of smart technology, softwares that speak to each other, new equipment as well, different ways of communicating as opposed to traveling. You're doing Skype meetings and TeamViewer and so on. So that transformation was happening pre-COVID-19. So I think that the COVID-19 may expedite that and force us into a new realm a little bit faster. But that is why digital transformation, was initiated to begin with. And so it's an opportunity for us to delve into that new technology space and explore that and see how we can maintain our productivity, because it is important that we maintain productivity and stability as a country and move forward together and not take advantage, not just on the price gouging side, which we definitely do not support, but also as we are all employees of each other. Some may own a company, but we all are accountable to one another in providing goods and services to this country that makes the wheel turn. So it doesn't matter really what position you are in a company. We have a responsibility to do the job for our sisters and brothers of the country.
Minister, there are two issues that before the government relating to the relationship between the business sector and the state. One is the issue of the VAT bonds, and the other one is the issue of the non-commercial imports. There may come a time in this country in the very near future where the private sector as a whole needs some kind of stimulus. Do you see a changed position from the government with regard to these two issues as being that stimulus?
What you're saying is something that obviously we would have to look at, the question of, and I think all countries would be put in that position to examine whether or not additional any economic stimulus might be required. But so I can't speak directly to that. That's something to be examined. If you first would want to look at how you have been impacted and what stimulus could be applied and what result is expected to be had. But with regard to the particular two items, these are items which are currently receiving the attention of the Minister of Finance. I know that there had been a recent cabinet approval with regard to the bonds, and they may have been in an enhanced position, which I'm not sure that the minister may have communicated, and I want to be very careful about that. And with regard to the other matter of shipments, related to shipments and the perceived bureaucracy introduced by customs, perceived as I see, the Minister of Finance gave a commitment that he will speak to the matter today. And if he hasn't at this time, I am sure that he would be coming up with some answers pretty soon. I know he had committed to meeting with the affected couriers and maybe the chamber and so on. And he did on Wednesday, Ms. Franca Costello is just saying. And so I'm pretty sure that he will come come forward with a solution pretty soon. Yeah?
Yeah, if I might, Minister, if I might jump in,
yes.
I think to answer Anthony's question, what we are seeing as the private sector, and I'm sure Franco will agree with me, is we're seeing a lot more engagement from the ministers that we interface with, health, finance, and trade specifically. And Anthony, if you read your competing paper today, you would see I commended the minister for his proactive approach and his empathy in the way he handled that meeting, because he was very specific, where he says, I recognize how this is affecting your business, and I'm trying to manage this against the loss of revenue, but I am going to find a way so that the business is not impacted negatively. And I think what we're seeing is a lot more engagement and positive collaboration between business and government going forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm not sure, is there anything else anyone would like to raise? But I want to thank you all for coming out today and for the very comprehensive discussions on the wide array of topics that we've dealt with today. Thank you very, very much. And we'll continue to report to you on the things promised, particularly the levels of supplies and so on. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
This is TTT. Live for local.
The winning numbers in the National Lottery online draws for Friday 13th March 2020 at 10:30 a.m. Playway, the number 29 Opium Man, Mega Ball Cold. Pick 2, the numbers 29 and 8 in that order. Pick 4, the numbers 1, 9, 8 and 3 in that order. And at 1 p.m, Playway, the number 10 Monkey, Mega Ball Cold. Pick 2, the numbers 33 and 36 in that order. Pick 4, the numbers 9, 0, 0 and 2 in that order.
If you are a parent, chances are you're worried and have questions about just how contagious coronavirus is and whether your child could be at risk.